Okay.
No,
So
no.
first of all, thanks everybody for coming out. This is the team that has made it happen. I think everybody here knows us, but in case you don't, that's the team. Unfortunately, Sally is home taking care of her son who is sick today, and JC unfortunately is sick as well. My wife is looking after our kid. But the rest of us are here. We're not even close to our schedule tonight. Completely forgot I was supposed to come up here and talk about these slides, actually. Matt tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, you know what you're supposed to be doing? I'm like, yeah. Oh no, I forgot. Anyway, I hope everybody's enjoying the conversation, catching up with some other crazy Toronto real estate investors and having a drink. Couple quick notes. If you're not familiar with this place, washrooms are right below us, so that's where they are if you can't find them. Also, please stay safe. If you have enjoyed yourself a little bit too much tonight, please take a taxi or Uber home. And this is a fantastic room. Like everybody in here, we're all Toronto real estate investors, so we're all a little off to put up with it because it's tough. But I always say this: your network is your net worth, and go meet some other people in this room. There's a lot of talent in there.
Oh, and this is different than a normal meetup because these are people who actually have done something.
Yes, everybody in here is a client, so everybody here has taken action. Because usually half the time we have people who attend the meetups and don't do anything. So. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick update on the market. So I was hoping that Tread would actually have their November numbers out, but they didn't have them released yet today. So this is basically sales volume that we can see, and you can see it's quite low. And I expect sales volumes to continue to stay low through November and December. We're seeing little blips here and there, so I'll be curious to see if December's maybe a little bit higher than last year's. But right now we are trending way below what we saw in 2020, 2021. Though I'd say those are a bit of exceptional years. So what I think is interesting is what we're seeing in average home prices. A lot of times you hear these headlines about complete collapses happening in the market. And there is truth to declining prices, but it's not as bad, I think, as what you're seeing in some of the headlines. Because some of the headlines are like 20% decreases in prices, right? But this is Trev data. This is what we're seeing across the city right now. There's not a 20% drop. Actually, in October we saw a year-over-year increase, but I would say in November we're probably back to year-over-year close to 0% change. So we've regressed about 1-ish year in pricing. That's what people will be looking for as a measure. This is very interesting though. So what we're seeing is a reduction in inventory. As rates have gone up, remember, we're a bit of a special group. We're investors, so we are most people who are active in real estate are active in real estate because they're moving somewhere, right? They're selling their house and they're moving to a new place. That's the majority of folks. Those folks don't want to go to a new place right now. Right? The average person is struggling with high interest rates. Most people are putting 20%, maybe 25% down on their homes when they do move. So they've got these mortgages with huge monthly payments, and they're not willing to move somewhere, even if it's gone down in price, because they're still having to deal with a large monthly payment. And so less people are putting their homes in the market as a result. And you can see that there's been a huge drop off in available inventory. And I think what's more interesting is actually the absorption of that. So I talked to a bunch of clients about absorption rates. And whenever I talk about absorption rates, this is the stat we're actually talking about, the sales to new listing ratio. If you see through September and October there, the sales to new listing ratio is actually quite low. And every time we see a low sales to new listing ratio, the market is not absorbing the inventory that exists. And it's a leading indicator of where prices are going to go. So the lower that bar is, the cheaper things are going to get. And I really wish we had the November data, because I'd love to see that. I bet you that bar has gone up. And we know this because right around November, we had a whole bunch of clients executing late October, early November, because prices just plummeted. People were holdouts. People had been listing through the summer, action wasn't happening on their listings, and they were willing to take lower prices. So, we'll see in January when I do these slides again. I'm pretty certain we'll have to see an increase there because prices did come down. And this is a contrasting that absorption rate that I talked about against home sales price. And you can see, as I mentioned, like the year-over-year average home sales price hasn't actually changed that much. We're back to kind of a 0% at this moment, but that absorption rate going down, right? So, we're short term, I think we may still see a depressed market. I think the hard part will be what happens in a year. The market's a little bit more rate sensitive. I should say a little bit more rate sensitive. The market's a bit rate sensitive right now. And it's not that they're sensitive to the rates, they're sensitive to the stability around the rates, right? And there's been a bit of signaling from Bank of Canada that we're finally reaching stability. And that may be enough to turn that trend around. Right? So I think we're really, I don't think we're going to see any rate increases happening, December 6th, I think is the next one, next week.
So you're saying they're going to go down then?
No. I don't, I'd be very smart to go down.
That's what I heard you say. I think that's what I heard you say.
We're gonna make the crystal ball exercise. We're gonna pass it over to Hugo for that.
So roll my dice.
Yeah, roll the dice. But the stability can be enough to bring people back out as buyers, and we're seeing a little bit of that. So in this past week, there's 2 properties that we were keeping an eye on. One went to 6 offers and one went to 5 offers, which is kind of a typical Toronto market. Interestingly, the sale prices on those weren't any higher than what we expected. So buyer activity is back, but not necessarily pricing. But usually, when you see an increase in demand, eventually the price starts to turn around. So all these signs, I think, are pointing towards potentially, kind of what we're in the bottom now, and maybe turn early next year. We'll see what Hugo has to say about rates. This is just so you guys are all clients, I don't have to explain this. This is HPI data, home price index. So just to give a quick update on what we've been seeing there has been a correction in price, change in pricing. So I don't like to use the word correction. Change in pricing downwards over the last couple of months that we've seen across the board. I want to talk a bit about condos. So, if you're trying to sell a condo right now, it's pretty miserable. It's the truth, guys, sorry. It can't be both a good time to buy and a good time to sell. It is a good time to buy, it is not a good time to sell. Especially condos, because inventory has dropped. So typical Toronto inventory for condos is more like about 3 months. But in the last 3 to 4 months, we've seen that rise to almost 8 months of inventory, right? There's just a lot of product out there right now. And while prices haven't come down drastically, I can guarantee you, with 8 months of inventory sitting out there and a whole bunch of new builds closing in 2024, that amount of inventory is just going to continue rising. So, if you must sell your condo, sell it soon. Because I do feel that this is going to get worse. And we know this because we know that's going to be a whole bunch of housing closings happening in 2024 for new builders. If you are looking to buy a condo to live in, not as an investment, because we don't necessarily think they're the best investments, but if you're looking for a condo to live in, now is a great time. You can get unreasonable conditions in there. You can get long financing.
And on assignments.
And on assignment, that's a great point too. There's a lot of folks, whose plan was to buy a condo, assign it for a profit, and get out, and now they're faced with closing under a high interest rate environment. And there's a lot of people who can't do that, right? So those people are really looking to offload their properties.
We're actually seeing like 6-figure discounts
Yeah.
on pre-construction condo assignments right now. Actually, like
Yeah.
people are so desperate to get out because they bought for pricing that they shouldn't have bought at. And so we've seen like $800,000 condos that were purchased on paper selling for less than $700, for example. So like, yes, there are good deals to be had out there. I'm not saying they're good investments, like Ming said, but just giving you an indication of what we are seeing out there for your university graduate son or daughter, or what have you. That's what
And the same trends echoed uptown, but you'll see the kind of the difference with uptown is the volatility. This graph swings higher and lower for uptown, though it follows a similar trend. Okay, friends of Volition.
Hey Hugo.
This is if you don't know Hugo, he's a regular guest of ours, partner at Vine, investor himself. He's here for most of the night.
Are you speaking?
Sorry?
Are you speaking?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, you can not.
Would you like to give a couple of updates?
Yeah.
Yes, the rates are going down next month.
Sorry?
Next week.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a slide,
The next
right?
slide is this.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So.
Would you like to speak now?
Yeah, sure.
The more drinks we have, the more interesting the presentation will be. And the better the rates will get, guys.
Thanks, Ming. Well, I didn't plan any of this, it's just to be transparent. But happy holidays, guys. Good evening. Thank you to Volition. Thank you to a lot of you guys. I've worked with a lot of people here. I've had at least a few conversations with some of you guys. So it's been interesting 2023 to say the least, but I think I'm generally very optimistic. So there's always an opportunity as far as I'm concerned. So I didn't prepare anything at all. I thought I would just share a few insights, and I'm happy to answer any questions if we have some time, but I'm also here the rest of the night to answer any one-on-one questions. So, rates, we can talk about that. So we put out newsletters every month, and they go into a lot more in-depth insights and technical data and charts and stuff that I'll probably get into today. And if you're not on that, we share that with the team on Volition. Happy to add you guys to that. But I just kind of want to make maybe a few observations or points that we are seeing. So interest rates at the end of the day, all come down to inflation. If you can get inflation down, you'll see rates come down. I think most of the data that we have seen, at least the ones that are very important, have all shown a trend that we should start to see rates come down probably sooner than we expected. So for example, biggest data trend is inflation. I think just a few weeks ago dropped from, I think it was 3.8 down to 3.1%. That's a pretty significant drop. And once it gets between that 2 to 3% band that the Bank of Canada wants it to be at, you should start to see rates, really kind of come down quite a bit. So that's probably the most important stat to watch for, and that comes out every single month. There's an update to that. The other one is unemployment. Generally, you want to see unemployment go up in an environment where you want rates to come down, and the idea is, as unemployment comes down and more people are looking for jobs, employers have to pay more money to attract talent, and by me paying a higher salary, it's going to increase inflation. So generally you want to see unemployment creep up in an environment where you're trying to get rates down. Unemployment's been creeping up. I think last week some data came out, there was a bit of an increase to unemployment. Another big data point is the general GDP, like what's going on with the health of the economy. GDP, I think just last week officially showed that we were in a pretty much a technical recession. So GDP is also, the economy is shrinking essentially. So all the trends and the data are supporting that rate should start to come down. And I think a lot of the economists were predicting by the end of next year, on average, a lot of them were predicting between 1% decrease. And I think I saw some articles that a little bit more ambitious economists predicting 2% decrease. I don't think that's the case, but who knows at this point. But I think it's very reasonable for any modeling or anyone who's purchasing or looking to renew in the new year that there will be some sort of decrease by next year, all else being equal. Some economists predict rates could come down as early as March, before the spring market kicks in. We do have an announcement, it's actually this week, so Wednesday, I think it is. So there'll be a little bit more insights on exactly where their mind is at. So if any of you guys have renewals that are, coming up, and you have like these early renewal options where you can get out of it, I would wait maybe until the first few months of the year. the banks are generally, actually before I say this, how many of you guys have a renewal coming up and you're getting harassed by the bank? In the next few months, you have a renewal coming up. So the banks are actually hiring, most of the banks have hired almost like an army of people to call you to renew your beautiful variable rate into a long-term fixed rate. Because I think they're pretty aware that most people who are going to be locked in will probably be stuck at these very high rates for the next little while. And unfortunately, a lot of people who, were just in a situation where they just couldn't deal with the fact that there was so much fluctuations, have locked in, in many cases 6% or more, and they're going to be stuck with that for a few years, right? So the banks have been pretty aggressive almost every call I had with someone who's got a renewal has told me they've been harassed by the bank to renew into usually it's a 3-year fixed. That's kind of the go-to. Because if you're looking on paper, just for context, a 1-year fixed rate is somewhere in the low 7s. A 2-year rate's probably high 6s, low 7s. A 3-year drops somewhere in the mid 6s, and then 4 or 5 could be anywhere from high 5s to low 6s. That's kind of where a fixed is at. And when you look at that, you're like, oh wow, the 3-year looks not so bad. And that's where a lot of people are getting into, especially when you can do that with a quick phone call, sign a document, super easy. I've just eliminated any pain that rates can go up, right? So that's kind of the motivation behind the banks. And if you have had a mortgage for a little while, you know that variable generally is the best way to go, at least historically, for the last 30 years or more. But in the last 2 years, it's been really painful, right? Because it's gone up almost 5%. So anyone who got a mortgage for the first time in their life 2 years ago is like, man, that was the worst advice. I should have listened to my parents who dealt with like 15% and 18% interest rates, and I should have gone fixed, right? So the way I look at it is, we've been on this crazy roller coaster going up and seeing rates almost 5% worth of increases in 2 years. And I think that if we're not at the top of that roller coaster, we're literally about to see some sort of a drop where we'll see rates come down. So if you're willing to take a little bit of a risk in knowing that, hey, rates are probably not going to go up anymore, and the next move, at some point, we just don't know when, will be a rate decrease. There's an opportunity to jump back into variable and enjoy those rate savings. Because even if you get a crappy variable rate, like right now, a crappy variable rate would be like, it's usually prime less something, right? So prime is 7.2. A crappy variable rate would be like prime less 20. That's pretty bad, but that's the average these days with the banks. That would mean that you would have a rate of 7% today, but by the end of next year, it could easily be 6. The year after, maybe 5, and so on, right? That's a bad rate, really. But even in that scenario, I think you're still way better off than locking in for like 6 point whatever it is for multiple years, fully knowing that you're going to, if you were to refinance, you have a massive penalty. So anyone who's an investor and all of a sudden starts to see their house go up in value and says, hey, you know what, I would like to take some money out and buy another one. You can probably do that, but maybe you're going to pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on the penalty. The banks fully know this, which is why they're encouraging people to lock in. They're also making variable options very unattractive. So has anyone tried to get a mortgage recently or has had a conversation about variable or fixed? Maybe? Someone? Maybe not? It's okay. So the variable rates, when compared to a fixed rate, are actually pretty bad. Like the discounts on variable rate used to be as high as prime less 1, maybe even prime less 1.25, I remember. That was a very attractive variable rate. Right now, the average bank is prime less 0.05 or 0.1, more or less. You can get a little bit better, but that's kind of the average. So they have made it very unattractive on purpose to go variable because they fully want you to load up on these fixed rates. So these are just observations. I'm not predicting the future here. I'm just using the data that we have and what we're generally seeing and the feedback we get from our lenders. But I do think that the discounts on a variable will eventually start to get more attractive next year. So if you have an opportunity to renew, you have to make decisions around renewals. Ask your lender for a variable rate. I'm happy to put an email saying, I spoke to John Smith, definitely can get him 6.5 on the variable. Send that to your lender, I don't care, right? I'm happy to do that. But I think variable rate is probably the next, is something I consider back now more than ever. Now in terms of the actual real estate environment, again, these are just observations. So I represent a company that does about $2 billion of volume every year. And so I'm saying, as a team, we're a team of maybe 70 across the country. We have seen a bit of an uptick in purchase transactions across the country. So this is not just my observation, this is this pretty large data set. We are seeing more transactions. And I was just telling someone, I had at least 9 calls today, of which 7 of them were purchase calls. And the general feedback or comments that I got was, I'm like, why do you get into the market now in December? We're going into a slower period, it's winter, that sort of thing. And the general feedback was, I think rates are coming down next year. And I think that spring, summer could be very busy for real estate buyers, especially when you have, we've had about 2 million immigrants come to Canada in the last 2 years or so. We've had, how much, maybe 40% decrease in real estate transactions? I'm not sure of the number, something like that, right? So there's been a lot less people buying stuff. We're not building it more than we're able to supply. In fact, a lot of builders have put their projects on hold because the rates and the costs are so high. So we have an influx of people coming to the country, and with rates coming down, demand generally goes up. And generally a very perfect time to get started in real estate is spring, summer. So a lot of these clients have shared with us that, hey, I'd like to get into the market before things could get out of control in the spring and the summer. So I feel like there's a bit of a window of opportunity if you're seriously looking to buy, not sell, because I agree with you, I think you should wait if you have the option to wait until spring, summer. But I think there's an opportunity to get into the market now, either as an investor or as an end user, before, the spring, summer. I don't know what to expect that, but I do expect it to be busier than it was this year. So that's just some thoughts for any one of you guys that are kind of actively looking. And one note I always think about, someone asked me, they said, well, do you really think that, with a slight decrease in rates, it'll sort of flood the market and get busy? And I said, well, one of the busiest times I've ever seen in my career was when me and everyone else in this room was trapped in their house and couldn't leave, it was called COVID. I literally assumed, I don't know about you guys, that I could not earn an income, because I figured, well, who's gonna buy a house? You can't leave your house. You can't even go to the property to look at it. And everything was shutting down. But it was the busiest time, and by far, like double, it was crazy. Because rates were like 1 point whatever, right? So there's a direct correlation between interest rates and demand, particularly in the GTA, because it's a pretty attractive market to be living in. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. It's a very highly leveraged city as well. So again, those are just some notes that we're seeing. So yeah, be very optimistic. I'm very optimistic. We're budgeting and setting goals for the next year and a few years based on slightly higher targets. I think the average note I've seen is between 5 to 10% growth for next year. Seems to be kind of what we're seeing. It could be more. So just my, I guess, outlook for what's going on. As a bonus, unless you want to add. Question? Sorry, hey, louder. Yeah, so I would say on average, most of the rules have remained the same. There's been the biggest rule change I think was November 1st. We talked about it at the last meetup that I was here, where the readvanceable mortgages, if you guys have had some of those, typically you can get a readvanceable mortgage at 80% of the value. That readvanceable feature, meaning as you pay down the mortgage, how much you can unlock immediately, is now at 65% of the value. So that was a big change, I guess. Qualifying has just become hard because rates are almost 5% higher. So previously I was using 4 or 5% interest rates as a stress test. Now we're using sometimes 9 or more percent. So most people's incomes have not doubled in 2 years. And so qualifying is going to be obviously harder. The values have, depending on where you live, kind of been consistent. They haven't really come up too much or dropped off significantly, at least just recently. But qualifying has gone harder because of the stress test. I read somewhere that in 2025, there's a record number of renewals coming out. I think it was something like 400 billion in Canada. So in 2 years, anyone who locked into a variable rate, getting near the end of their 5-year term, those at 1 point whatever percent rates are coming due. And so there'll be a whole bunch of people who will be eligible for renewals. And hopefully by then, rates have come down enough where qualifying for those is a little bit more attractive. And just another observation is I think next year, not only will there be a little bit of an uptick in purchases, I think unfortunately there'll also be an uptick in just refinances for like stress. Because I would say more than ever recently, we're getting clients that are just like completely maxed out. They've exhausted their credit facilities, line of credits and things like this. Some of them have had to unload their investment properties because they didn't work with Volition and were doing all their modeling off of like a 1.5% interest rate and didn't realize that rates could go up to 6%, or didn't assume or didn't plan for the possibility that rates could go up, right? And they just have to unload because they can't carry these losses for too long. And unfortunately, they're not even able to refinance to help pay down debt because the values may have remained the same or have come down a little bit, right? So I do think that we might see a lot more refinancing. As soon as rates creep down a little bit, I think some people will try to jump back in and clean themselves out with their bank. So those are just some things that we're expecting or planning for.
Hugo, in your conversations with the banks, 5-year rates have come down 90 beats from the government of Canada, but the banks' rates have come down by 10 to 20 beats or whatever. Like, what are you seeing there in that? Like, how long do the rates have to stay low for the banks to kind of bring it down?
Well, this is probably a political answer to that, but it's good
Answers my
business.
bank stock.
Good business for the banks. I mean, I would probably ride that along as possible with my bank buddies, and say, hey guys, listen, let's just wait a little while and cash in while these rates, because he's right. So what he's referring to is the bond yields, which impact particularly fixed rates, have come down. So you can Google search Canadian bond yields. You can go to our website. We have a resource like live, tells you what the different yields are for 1 to 10-year terms, and they've all come down. So across the board, these bond yields have come down particularly in the last few weeks. But the banks have a very sort of lagging, delay to pass those savings on to you, because they like one extra day of not passing those savings to you is millions of profit for the banks. So they're going to drag it out, and until one of them puts their flag out and says, hey, I want to be the first one to get out there, everybody else sort of plays along and waits. Generally, it's like RBC and TD. They generally lead the pack of the big banks. So once TD decides to do something, or RBC, everyone else sort of follows that same week to be aligned. But we have seen rates come down marginally in the last week or so. Like I'm talking like 0.05. So you're right. I mean, you'll probably see more of that. Keep in mind that the bank's calendar year or fiscal year starts on November 1st, and we're in December, whatever it is, the 4th, so it's been about a month. So the banks, may not have the same desire to be competitive at this time of the year either. I find that they generally ramp up. So if you're trying to get a mortgage and you could choose your month, around the springtime is generally the best time in terms of promotions or rates. In terms of like the 12-month period, I find the banks are the most competitive around there, and usually around the fall. Those are historically the two best times to compete. The banks are competing with each other, but yeah, they're not going to pass that along to you. But if the rates went up, you can guarantee like 2 seconds before your rates already gone up. But yeah, that's kind of always been the case. Yeah.
So I got some gray hair, I've been around a little while, not like 15, 18%, my parents, but 6, 7, 8% seen for a long time around
Standard.
here. In the last 5, 10 years, not to put you on the spot with just a wall, but I don't see the rates going back to 1, 2, 3.
No, I agree. Yeah. Who knows? We're just kind of making stuff up at this point, but I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to see rates somewhere between a 3 to 4% on a 5-year term as sort of a normalized rate. Because I think most people would agree that the rates as they are now for the economy that we have today is not conducive for productivity, really. No one's buying anything, no one's building anything because these rates are too expensive. We've built an economy in the last few years, unfortunately, at a rate of 1-point-something%. So I think the rates, I believe, would probably normalize around that 3 to 4, maybe high 4% range. So one strategy that we've been putting out there to some clients is, hey, listen, why don't you take a 5-year variable today, and over the next 2 years, let's see those rates come down. I think the average bank economist, publicly, you can look this up, is predicting about 2 to 2.5% decreases in the next 2 years. So let's say that's all we get. Let's say it just goes from the high 6s down to somewhere in the low to mid 4s, and that's all that we get in decreases. At that point, if you've taken a 5-year variable and you've got 3 years left, you might want to consider, do I continue riding this out and take the risk that rates could go up, or do I maybe lock in because rates are in a world where it makes a little more sense. So it's probably an interesting way to play it over the next 2 years. But I think that's probably reasonable. But who knows? Have another COVID or another war or something that could bring. I don't think it's sustainable, obviously, but I think that 3 to 4% is normal. Before COVID, rates were trending. They started to break north of that 4% range when we had a bit of a heavy amount of growth. So, and that was probably a reasonable rate for that time. That's probably reasonable.
Hugo, to confirm, is that mortgage rate or Bank of Canada rate?
I'm talking, these are all mortgage rates I'm referring to. So the Bank of Canada rate today is generally sets the benchmark for what rates will become. So I'm referring to like 5-year sort of fixed rates as a benchmark. Yeah.
Any updates on the CMHC increase from million to like 1.5 million?
Yeah, so we had made a note that I had actually a conversation with someone at CMHC pre-COVID. Literally, I had this on video. It's somewhere on our website. And she said that we have put in place a plan to launch a $1.5 million insured program for Toronto and Vancouver. She wasn't clear exactly on the minimum down payment, but I understood it was like 10% down, $1.5 million purchase. And they had already set up the whole program. They were ready to launch it, and then COVID happened, and they've obviously put it on the back burner. It's probably not the kind of thing that type of organization, it's a crown corporation, is going to say, hey, you know what? Let's stimulate the economy and show you this amazing program where you put 10% down on a $1.5 million purchase. So I would imagine they probably are just waiting to launch that. Could be, again, I don't have an update on that. I would imagine if they were to launch it when we start to see rates come down, end of 2024, but nothing in the works currently. But I'll actually check in with her, because I haven't thought about that, and see if there's anything she's willing to share. But I wouldn't imagine it would be anytime soon, because it's like a win. You know, but it's going to be hard to qualify, I'll be honest with you. We had I had a call with someone today, and she was looking for a fairly large mortgage, about $1 million, and you know, these days you're going to need like 200 plus grand to make that work. On average, right? Normal sort of lending rules. Whereas, you know, 2 years ago you probably needed, you know, mid hundreds, less than that. So it's definitely gone harder to qualify for lending. The good news is that there isn't just banks, there are B lenders, and I think there's a misunderstanding on how B lending works. People seem to think that B lenders are these, you know, sketchy lenders that, you know, are trying to take your home. And you're probably referring to private lending, which is a completely different world. They're definitely going to lend on the asset and are going to be a little bit expensive. But B lenders are basically just like bank lending with more rules, with less rules, and slightly more flexible options. And the funny thing is, you can get a bank rate at, let's say, Scotia or TD for somewhere in the 7.3 range for 1 year. I could take you to a B lender and it's probably 7.5%. You know, they do charge you a fee though, a one-time fee, 1%. But for someone who can only qualify with that option, that's not a bad deal. Especially because 1 or 2 years into it, you can probably go back to a regular lender. So, you know, I think it just having a conversation with someone outside of the bank could open up your eyes to some options you didn't know about. I got a little raffle. So,
Yay!
for AirPods. They will be legit. I don't know if this is a photo of legit AirPods. Or some eBay ones. I should have grabbed that bag.
Got me going.
AliExpress.
AliExpress. I was trying to think of it. I forgot the name of it. So anyone who's here, did you guys all get a raffle ticket? And if you didn't, we can have your name.
3 tickets to the raffle.
Yes.
We have, oh, you're across your fingers. Okay, got it.
I told my mom I needed new
AirPod? So they're the pros, so they're the ones that I think are better. The noise cancellation. Okay, so Maheen.
Oh!
Maheen? Oh, there it is. I'll take your info and we'll. Congrats, man. And again, I just want to thank the whole team of Volition. These guys have been awesome. We do work with a couple other realtor offices, and when these guys, you know, bring us something, you know, it makes our job a lot easier because it makes a lot more sense. You know, the clients generally understands what's going on, isn't being sort of coerced to some deal that doesn't really make sense. So it does happen. I know it's funny, but it happens all the time. Like, you know, my cousin told me I should get this duplex in the middle of nowhere, and because the cash flow is so great. But you know, these guys are pros. We work with a lot of them, and you know, we love working with them. So big round of applause for them. And happy holidays to everybody.
Thanks, Hugo. So just taking into context some of what Hugo was talking about, in case it isn't clear, now is a good time to buy. Because not only are we seeing these decreases in prices, but we're seeing a seasonality decrease as well. Kind of like a double dip, right? So we're down on price, and it's December, so most people aren't out there buying. So we see a slow market as well. And some of our clients have been able to capitalize on this kind of double dip that we're seeing right now. The other thing that comes up sometimes as I'm talking to folks is it better to buy now on the down. Nobody likes to buy an asset that's continuing to go down, or buy when the market starts to rise again. Does anybody know which is better? Buy as it's going down. Do you know why it's better to buy? The same asset. Let's say you're buying one property, $1 million, but decreasing, and same property, same price, $1 million, but the market's rising. Competition. Like, and if you guys have bought in a regular Toronto market, it's always bloody hot, right? So here on the down, for the same asset value, you're getting conditions, right? You guys remember those things? Like, I dust them off this year and got to use them a couple of times, right? So we get conditions. We have, I got to see my inspector again. I haven't seen him in a long time, right? Like, we got to have inspections on properties. So VTBs, yeah. For people offering VTBs. These are words we never get to use in a Toronto market, right? So even for the same asset value, in a declining market, we're able to have all these things in our favor. Plus, we have more pick and choose right now. So you can really go for those prime locations, right? Because usually they're really high demand. The second a property comes up in a great spot, it's gone. And these days it sits for a little bit, so you actually have some time for that. You have some time to run analysis. You have some time for us to run analysis for you guys. Like, these are things that we usually don't always have the luxury of being able to do. So, anyway, it's a good time to buy. And we don't know how long that's going to last for, because this is a very unpredictable market. Maybe if we do see, because Hugo's now promised us rate increases.
This is recorded.
It's recorded?
Crystal clear.
So disclaimer.
Yeah.
So get a variable mortgage now.
Get a variable rate mortgage on a property you're going to buy in the next 2 or 3 months. See?
So, have you guys thought about, you always used to have a map of where in Toronto, if you
Yeah.
sort of like,
Yeah.
has the recent rule changes about multiplexes and potentially, being able to build 5-6 stories on certain streets?
Has that changed that map?
Yeah.
Not really. So, and I'll tell you what. The reason it hasn't changed it is because that map was never based on what you're allowed to do or development potential, but more on tenant profiles, right? So that map is more based on rents, tenant profiles, transit access, that kind of stuff. I think having the city open up to build 4 as of right is a fantastic thing and a big step in the right direction. But at the end of the day, doing any multifamily is still extremely difficult. It's like they took one out of 100 things that you would have to jump through out of the steps, which is good, because it wasn't necessarily an easy thing to get through before. You still have to build the property, and that's actually the hard part, right? And there's still also unclear use cases, right? So going through one right now where the main house is a 4-plex, no DC charges in that. Also looking at building a laneway at the back, should be no DC charges in that. But if we go to the city with both, they want to charge us DC. So, yeah, development charges. But the laneway should be DC deferred, DC exempt. 4-plex is DC exempt, but because now we're doing it all at once, it's 5 units, right? These are, the people in this room, these are common conversations, but this is literally at the bleeding edge of what's happening in the city, right? With our Dewson project, we were like the 3rd in front of the city to do the 4-plex DC deferral, so, or DC exemptions, right? So, there's not that many people doing this right now. We're one of the special folks, short bucks folks, who are doing this right now. So Arthur? Sorry, the other rules?
Bill 23.
Bill 23?
Building 4-plexes as of right.
Oh, like what are the big one is that you don't have to pay development charges, and you're allowed to do it in zones that, so it used to be you had to go for just R zone, right? So if you look at the zoning map, you have just residential zoning. Now they allow for 4-plexes as of right in any of the R asterisk zones. So RD, RM, I can't remember all of them. But all the other residential zones, you're now allowed to do 4 units. So you could do it in your North York suburb if you really wanted to. I don't suggest you do it there, but maybe you can now, right? So that's what's really opened it up. But I think for our investment model and our business model that we have here, we're still primarily operating in the same areas because we're very, very tenant focused, right? Above all else, we're trying to reduce tenant risk. So that's why we have that heat map. That's why we end up buying those places. So it's helpful for us, but yeah, the hard part's actually building the property. Any other questions? Getting your steps in done? I just got 10,000 waving my arms around. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. That's correct. 4 and under. Yeah. Yeah.
And then what Zane was talking about was along major thoroughways. Right?
Oh, that's changing as well. So I don't know what bill it's under, but they're looking at having it's up to 6 stories. Yeah, as of right on major roads. So the city's doing the right things, right, to make it easier to be able to do the development. It's tough to do development, and that's always the thing for me. It's like they made it 10% easier, right? Which is good, better than making it 10% harder.
But anyway, just to answer your question, like for example, if you've got a single-family home in Leaside or Forest Hill, are you changing that into a multiplex? So the thing is that they have opened it up, no doubt. So it means you can do it in a lot more places. But should you? Or are people actually going to do that? So everyone was touting Bill 23 as this, oh my God, it's going to change the face of Toronto. It really won't. Not really. Because at the end of the day, if you look to see where your tenant profile is going to live, or are they going to actually take a Forest Hill home or a Willowdale home or whatever, turn it into a multiplex? The business model doesn't make sense. So really, it's still going to be concentrated in the areas that Volition already focuses on. Does that make sense?
Cool. Any other questions? No. Well, also want to say thank you for coming out to hang out with your realtor. It's like when Matt and I were planning it, we're like,
Free drinks.
It's like they
how
be really good drinks.
Every 12 months. It's December last year, December this year. So.
But it's wonderful to have this community. When we were first having our very first meetup so many years ago, like this was the dream, to be able to have other investors and be able to, talk in a safe space and talk about my raccoon problems or whatever it happens to be, and have other people that are going through the same thing. So. Hopefully no rats. Okay, next meetup, live property analysis. So we are.
Oh, this is your suggestion.
Yeah, that's actually what. Oh yeah, that was yours. That's right. Thank you, Matt. And thank you for making Matt work, because he's going to do all the analysis. So that makes it even better of a meetup. So we're going to be taking just one property.
I don't know.
Maybe 2, but probably 1 doing a deep dive on it. Of everything that we go through on property analysis. So please come out to that if you'd like to learn. And that's it. I mean, there's this complimentary advisory session, which I'm sure you've heard a million times from us because you're clients. I was joking earlier on, we have a giveaway. Instead of half an hour with Matt, you get an hour with Matt today. I was like, I don't think that's a gift, guys. But we'll leave this up here, and yeah, that's it. I mean, the rest is just some. These are on rotating slides, so we'll go back. Well, these are just properties that we've had and sold, and thanks to our clients. But I think that's everything then, right? Okay, well, thank you very much. Have a drink, eat some food, and we'll chat.